With us this morning, a guy who is, I guess, feeling pretty good, but he's going about his job. He is a state representative from the 196th Legislative District, and he is Seth Grove, who has been talked about a lot the last few days. He was a guy who started a bill known as House Bill 2463. I think it eventually got to be called Bill 77. He can correct me on that. But he joins us here this morning because the governor had threatened to veto this bill. It is the right to know law, and the idea that even during emergencies, you should have the right to know what's happening. When people file right to know requests with the various executive agencies under the executive branch, they should be answered. Seth joins us here on WSBA to talk more about it this morning. Good morning, Seth. How are you?
Doing well, Gary. How are you?
Well, doing well. I guess you're kind of taking a lap, but not really. I mean, you were looking to get something done here. Talk a little bit about what brought you to this Bill 2463 and now what has happened since, and especially here in the last couple of days with the governor's final reaction.
Yeah, so a couple months ago, actually the start of the pandemic and governor's executive order and his complete takeover of state government, he decided not to open his right to know offices, which provides an avenue for citizens and the press to ask for documents and information, which is a bad thing. So, at the time, Governor wasn't answering any questions. He was vetting everything through his communication staff. So if let's say a bunch of news media were asking similar questions, they just lump them all together and just say, well, they're kind of interested in this. Talk about this a little bit. There was no communication. They were making decisions and not backing up with any data or information. So we decided to introduce a bill that basically said during emergency declarations, you have to keep your right to know offices open. Office of Open Records will set guidance on how to safely do that. Oh, and by the way, during emergency declaration, all your data is open for right to know. How you collect it, what you use it for, all of the models and any kind of quantitative data you use the data for are open for full disclosure to the general public.
Now, let me just insert something here for a minute. I want to just ask you a question before you go on. During this time, obviously, there's probably also going to be questions of the legislature in Pennsylvania on right to know. And I understand their right to know still was kind of in force. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, so the General Assembly, Republicans, Democrats, answered all of our right to know requests. The Treasurer, the Attorney General, Auditor General, counties, school districts, police office, county row office. I was just talking to Dave Sunday the other day. He's like, dude, I've been answering right to know requests this entire time. Right. So everybody was doing it, but the governor's office. And now there were some agencies responding, some in the executive branch, but most of them just shut it down and just didn't respond. And a lot of it was geared towards the Department of Health, trying to figure out how you're making these decisions and why you're making these decisions. We can talk about the business waivers. Remember that funness?
Absolutely.
We're going to pick winners and losers. All that. So it's well needed, because honestly, when we envisioned emergency declarations before 2020, it was always a hurricane would be hurricane flooding, something like that. Like I joke, but if a giant sinkhole opened up labor and industry and it fell to the ground, we wouldn't expect state employees to go spelunking to get documents, right? That's just crazy.
Right.
But during COVID, when agencies were, and by the way, state employees still aren't back to work.
Right.
They're still not back to work. So they're empty buildings. To send a state employee to an empty building to get a document is not going to spread COVID-19.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to ask. Is that I'm working, remotely as well, and our building's not totally empty. Mark's in it, but and I'm not going to make any joke about that. But in all seriousness, but the idea that the governor said the other day, I think a couple of things. Number one, they went to the old idea of, well, you can't mention names of people. Usually what happens on a national level when people decide they don't want to be open and transparent, they'll say, well, it's national security, right? I mean, they immediately go to that. He kind of went to like state security. I'm paraphrasing here. And the other one was that, well, we're putting our employees at jeopardy by going in there. Again, I'm paraphrasing. So these were the two main concerns that he had. But apparently he has since dropped those because he's now said, I'm going to let this go into law because I've been assured by the Department of Open Records that things, there's safeguards and all this kind of stuff in place. And yet the governor also said the other day, which was strange, when he said, well, if I was in the legislature, I would vote for this too. But when he was still going to veto it, and a lot of people were scratching their heads saying, what? Huh? Talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
And so our founders were geniuses, right? Like they set up a construct of government with checks and balances.
Right.
One of the checks and balances ingrained in the U.S. Constitution, Pennsylvania Constitution, is this thought of veto, which is a legislative power given to the governor as a check and balance on the legislative branch. Mm-hmm. But the governor can veto. That's a no vote. He can sign it. That's a yes vote. And he's actually allowed to abstain. Like, I can't abstain. I got a yes button and a no button, and that's it. It was not, I guess Illinois, when President Obama had like president or something like that. We don't have that ability, yes or no. So he has three choices to do a vote: yes, no, abstain.
Right.
So when he comes back and says, if I were in the legislature, I'd vote for it. Like, you can, Governor. That's what your signature is. Your yes vote is signing a bill into law saying, yes, I back this. I don't think they wanted it, and I think it has to do with the data. I don't believe they want to release their data, and we're seeing it with this entire new shutdown of restaurants. Press have asked, where's your data showing it's the bars? What do you say? Yes, I'll provide the data. 2 days later, no, I'm not providing the data.
Right.
And I don't think people need to know what specific bars. They want to see what the contact tracers are saying and their data is actually saying based on the bars. They want to see it, and it's been his biggest problem this entire time, making the decisions and not backing up with, quote, the data they're using. So we already have a right-to-know request. CBS 21 filed it on the restaurant data. So it's new into law as of midnight Sunday, and it's already being utilized. So it's a huge, new, powerful tool that people have. And
I've often said, and you and I have talked about this, I think, briefly, if what you are doing as a representative of the government, which is the people, by the way, we need to remind our representatives of that now, and they're not present company excluded, but I'm talking about our governors and so forth. We need to remind them that the people are the governing body and that you are simply representing their interests and looking out for them, but on their behalf. That if what you're doing is not able to be transparent and open to your employers, which is the people, then it's probably not very good policy. I mean, if you can't tell them about why you're doing it or all the various things you're taking into consideration to make the decisions you're making, then it probably is not very good policy. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely.
With Representative Seth Grove of the state legislature, 196 legislative districts. Seth, the author of the Right to Know bill, and the governor originally said he was going to veto it, has now said, after getting reassurance from the Office of Open Records that there will be guidelines to keep his employees safe, has said he will let the bill go through without signing it. Seth, I saw a couple articles the other day where you were saying, hey, the governor could really be historical here in terms of recognizing how important this openness and transparency is, and the governor saying, hey, if he was a representative, he would have voted for it. But it's got to be a little disappointing also that the governor is willing to let this go through without his signature. And I'm not sure. I did want to ask one little technical question here. I know in the federal legislature, in the Congress, if you let a bill go unsigned in the last 10 days of a session of Congress, it becomes what we call a pocket veto. I think it was Andrew Jackson that first used that, where he stuck a bill in the back pocket, he forgot about it, carried it around with him for 10 days, and it was the end of a legislative session. And, of course, when he finally figured out he hadn't signed it, the legislature couldn't come back at that time, so the bill was called a pocket veto. In other words, he killed it. Do you still have – is that the same in the state legislature? Now, obviously, this is during a session, so it becomes law automatically without his signature. But if it's at the end of a session of the state legislature, does it become, in effect, a pocket veto?
If we adjourn, there's like a 30-day rule that comes in.
Okay.
Where he has like 30 days to actually veto it or something like that.
So that is different than the federal.
It's very weird language. I don't think it's ever been used.
just with a curious question on my part, having been an old history teacher, I hadn't gone back into the state constitution to find that. So anyway, you were making a point beforehand, and I said to you, but not signing this bill says, well, some Republican legislator brought this up. The Republicans have been chasing me down. I've been getting the court to help me. I've been vetoing stuff, but I'm just going to let this go through. I mean, don't you want the full-throated endorsement of the executive branch and saying, hey, we believe in openness and transparency?
Yeah, I mean, they talk about it a lot, but push comes to shove, they're not actually very transparent at all. You can ask them questions, they'll hoe and hum. Even within our work for the Oversight Committee, it takes a lot to get documents and questions answered. Mm-hmm. Now, we've been blessed with oversight. We have yet to issue a subpoena. We've been able to work through that stuff, but it hasn't been easy. And going back to before we got lost, I mean,
right.
Even to the point of what models are you using? Like all these major decisions that have huge impacts on people's lives. There are businesses that are ruined and families that are ruined financially.
Right.
Suicides are up. Overdose deaths are up. There have been real negative consequences because of this entire thing, whether from the shutdown, et cetera. So, they would say, our models are saying, and when you ask them what models, we use models to make determinations. So which ones are you using? Many. They've never actually disclosed what models they used to destroy people's lives, ever. They've never released data. They've never highlighted anything. And when they do release benchmarks, remember the yellow benchmark of 50 new cases per 100,000? Big splash. We're using this. And then it became, we're using other stuff. And then the governor literally gets up there and saying, where did we get that 50? What was that about?
Well, in New York, I remember in New York at the time, we were at 38. And someone said, hey, we're 38 per, and they said, well, that's not the only thing we're using. And, well, wait a second. That's what you said. People are conditioned to play by rules. I mean, that's what we do. Yeah. And so when someone says, oh, by the way, I'm adding a new one today, it's like you move the scoreboard. I mean, okay, I thought we were winning 7-0, but now we're really losing 14-7. That's not the way we think.
Yeah. And you bring it back to masks. He issued an order. I'm mandating everybody to do masks. What was it, 2 weeks later? What do you mean mandate? I didn't mandate anybody to wear masks. It's optional. You should wear masks. It's a good thing.
Right.
A little bit later, no, we totally mandated masks. A little bit later, no. Who's mandating these masks? Who's doing it? The entire time has been complete confusion and chaos. And by the way, the legislative branch, particularly Republicans, have been the only ones that have had their offices open to answer these questions. And it has been so hard to address constituents' concerns because, A, we're shut out. The executive branch isn't open. You can't call. You still just say you can't call them and ask them a question. You can't. It's all being vetted through our offices, and we try to do the best job we can of trying to explain to people a bunch of decisions that aren't backed with any data and are vague. And it's not like we get briefings on it. Like we're out.
Well, whether he signs it or not, this is going to become a law now.
It is law. It is law.
It is law.
Yep.
And so how aggressive will people be now in going after this information that before didn't have the weight of law behind it? Will the governor be obstinate in terms of continuing to say, well, I'm not going to abide by the law? Your thoughts, about 30 seconds left.
So I hope the citizenry becomes very aggressive. I hope they start questioning everything. They start asking for documents, and they start filing right to know requests. It's very easy. Go to Office of Open Records, Pennsylvania. There's a great citizen's guide on how to do it. Go to the Department of Health website. There's a link there for Right to Know. Fill it out. Ask any question you want to about their data, how they collect their data, and any kind of modeling they're used to make those decisions.
Yeah, and
don't you have a right to do it.
Yeah. Don't do it just to be annoying. Do it because you really are interested in what's going on around you, and that's citizen activists do that. Seth, thank you for nailing this thing, and thank you for working. I think it's a great step. I think anything we do to have more transparency and openness is a good thing, and I appreciate you sponsoring the bill, and congratulations on having success with it. We look forward to talking again very soon, my friend.
Thanks for everything, Gary. Take care.
Seth, thank you. Seth Grove, representative of the 196th here on WSBA Morning News with Gary Sutton.